Call me Neoblade. This is a revamp of the Warp-In drill powered by Jack Attack. I strongly recommend you see his video on this, but I will explain the steps for you again, because the chrono boost for Protoss is not that important. It's important, but it's not. You do not have to check it every time. And we want to see this scene again here. This is Pit Drogo, as you can see, against Marine Lord, and we'll now slow it down. And the Warp-In drill is about camera positions. I assume Pit Drogo jumped to this location using a camera position, or using the minimap, but the cameras using hotkey locations, which I will call cameras from now on in this video. He jumped to it using cameras, warped in units, and now he will build pylons. This is a first step in learning the Warp-In drill, but I will break it down for you in the next few steps of this video. We'll just see this again, this Warp-In drill, and we'll slow it down now. You jump to the location where his pylon is, where his proxy gate is. He warps in units and he builds pylons afterwards. Keep that in mind when you see this video and learning the Warp-In drill. Thanks very much. This is the next part, and it's called cameras or Warp-In-Camera. So we'll type it here, Warp-In-Camera. If you're not familiar using cameras, you should definitely learn it. It's an important step to master StarCraft 2. It's important to use cameras for your mechanics, and I did 2 camera positions, hotkey locations, and if you are not able to use them, you should put one on your main base and one on your proxy pylon, or your pylon on the field, and train to jump between those. If you got the hang of it, you can easily warp in units and jump between those, and again warp in units. This is it for this part. We will see all steps in a big video in the end, but first of all I will explain the small steps for you. See you in the next part. This is the next part, and we're in a replay. The next part is called control groups and selecting your warp gates. If you use your standard button for selecting warp gates, which is displayed here if you're Protoss, or if you choose your warp gates using 3 or 4 or whatever you like, it's totally up to you, but using control groups is a very, very important mechanic for learning StarCraft 2. This is a hotkey trainer, and you can easily warp in stuff here, and your reaction time is measured here. In the first step, you should aim to get below 2 seconds, and then afterwards get below 1.5 seconds. I think this will be enough to learn the Warp-In drill correctly. Thanks for listening. Please try out this map, this hotkey trainer. You can find it in the arcade, and I see you guys in the next step. This part is called Warp-In, and the name of this map is NeoMT Proberto LOTV. You can find it in the arcade. And I chose this map so you can train your multitasking, which is very important for StarCraft 2, and you can practice Warp-In. We've practiced the hotkeys in an earlier step, so now it's up to you to train this in a real world situation. You could also play against the AI if this map is too difficult for you. I've chose hard, which is with only one attack, and I just practice warping in. And to make it a little bit more difficult, I warp in Zealots and Archons, move this probe around and morph the High Templars to Archons so I can attack with Charge Lot Archon. And though you might think Warp-In is a very easy task, if you do it on this map you will find it quite difficult, even though moving a probe around is not very difficult. Warping in is not very difficult, but doing both you find very difficult if you're a beginner, I think. If you're a Grandmaster, your Warp-In drill should be very good. You should be able to execute the Warp-In drill perfectly when you're a Grandmaster's player, or I hope you are very good at it. But if you're Bronze to Diamond, you can always improve your Warp-In drill, I think. Well, I move the probe around, I warp in, I move the probe around, I warp in, and you should aim for an SQ above 100 on this map. So you have to build enough gates, and I always forget to check my gates if they're ready, and to transform gates into warp gates. But I think I will. Will I forget about those gates all the time? I don't know. I guess not. Well, moving the probe around, warping in. Yeah, I think I forget about these gates the complete game. Well, that's a very major mistake, but you won't make it, and I attack the Terran because I need supply, and I want to train the Warp-In drill any further to warp in, and you just try to reduce this amount of time to 0. Then your Warp-In mechanics should be trained enough, and your multitasking should improve using this map. Thanks for listening, and we'll see us in the next part. This is the next part, and you can practice this part on any map. I strongly recommend using this map, NeoMT Proberto-Select. I changed this map so you can practice a one-on-one, and you can see this guy here is set up pretty heavily, but this tutorial video is about control groups. Again, you have to put all your nexuses in a control group so you can build probes all the time without looking at your base. but we'll move forward. And using hotkey and control groups are very, very important mechanics. I think there are the most fundamental mechanics, like A move and using hotkeys and control groups and using cameras. These four mechanics are the most important, but we'll just practice warp in and adding a control group. I jump to my probe using a control group as well, using 0, which I put left to 1 on the circumflex hotkey. I deactivated the NeoMT Proberto, the Proberto, because I want to focus on my warp and drill and my hotkeys and using the control groups. And what should you do? You can train it against a very easy AI or an elite AI. You choose a map with 2 watchtowers and you move with your zealots to these both locations, watching the minimap, and when your watchtower is activated, you walk back. And this is my warp in zone, and I always try to warp in and adding a control group and then move to the watchtower, a move to the watchtower. I have to be precise. I use 2 different kind of units: Charge Lots, Archons and Dark Templar. And now you will see these units will leave because they're on a control group. These were not perfectly warped in, and now my PC has a problem. I hope the video will stay in-game. It looks like it, so we'll just have my PC sometimes has hiccups, but I think it will resume. Come on, come on, come on. And there we go. And yeah. So you see, I move my units using the minimap, which is an important step. And now I add a new nexus, I warp in, I add to a control group, and I move my stuff around. That's it for this step, adding to a control group. This part is called saturation. Saturation has become a very important step in Legacy of the Void. So what will we do in this step? You take a look at your chrono boost, which should be on your forges or your stargates or your robotics facilities or some other stuff. This is very simple step because your chrono boost won't need any action. You just put the spell on some buildings and build those buildings against left or right to your main nexus or your natural, because then when you take a look at your saturation you can check your chrono boost as well. So chrono boost is not a major part of the warp and drill anymore, but it's of course important you check it. What did I do just now? I've seen a red saturation, and when learning the saturation you just swap to your nexuses. Any red nexus, any red number you should correct, transferring probes to your next base. the base should be ready. It should be up and running. And the Mamba rule for saturation, Mamba is a Zerg Grandmaster, former student of mine, is 16 or 8 at a base where only 7 patches or less are mining. If you have 8 minerals, you can easily put 16 on it, but if it's 7 or less, you put 8 on them. Or if you're that good, you can easily choose the number which is pointed out above your nexus. So in the mid game and the late game, one of your major tasks is building enough bases and transferring probes all the time when you're here mineral field depleted. And we'll take a look how I do this. So there is 14 and I transfer probes and I warp in and I check my saturation again, I hope. Yeah, there it is. And there is a red saturation which I correct right away. I think I will transfer 3 probes. Yeah, I do. And now it's 8. 16 or 8. Here it's 7, but it's okay too because here's only an 8. 16 because all 8 mineral field patches are there. But if this mineral field is depleted, I should transfer 8 to this base. 15. And when this base is ready, I think I will do 8 here and 8 here. Let's take a look. 8 on this base. 7 in the main. 11, 7, 8, 16, 11. And this base is not ready. I think you grasp the concept of saturating your bases correctly. You should train to do this step using your warp-in drill. Your warp-in will take 6 game time seconds. Real time I think it's 3 or so. And you should use these 3 seconds to check your saturation at every base. It's very important you have a good saturation on each base. We'll see you, or I see you in the next part. Building pylons is the next step, and this is pretty straightforward. You jump to a base using the base cam or cameras and you build pylons. When you start using this, you take a look at your supply, which is hidden here, and you build 1 pylon per base. So if you have 3 bases, you build 3 pylons. Let's assume we have 2 bases, you build 1 pylon here and 1 pylon here, or you can just build 2 pylons behind your economy if there are none, like this. But if you're a more experienced player in the warp-in drill, we will try a more difficult situation, because sometimes you have oversupply because you lost units in a fight, and then we will build only 1 pylon or even no pylon. But in the beginning I strongly recommend you warp in and build a pylon. So again, jump to your base and build a pylon. That's it for this step, and we'll see all steps in a few moments using a real map. This is the last part, and it's called a tech move to death. attack move to death, or into a zone of death. A zone of death is this area here, and when you first train it, you just send your zealots and archons there in small groups, so the Terran will have no trouble killing it. Or you play this map not on very easy, like I did. You play this map on elite, then the opponent will harass you, attack you, and build additional stuff. I will show you another way to practice it. We'll do a warp-in. Since we have 200 supply, we do not need pylons anymore. We do a warp-in, checking the saturation, using control groups and hotkeys to A-move into a zone of death, warping in, checking my upgrades, checking saturation, and there's the GG well played, because if you kill this planetary fortress and this planetary fortress, this map is over. As you can see, I have 3 upgrades, so I think the Terran would stand a chance if you do not do upgrades at all. The second thing I show you should practice is using a multiplayer map. It's a new map pool with old maps like Daybreak or Echo or Habitation Station, but you can choose other maps as well, which you're more familiar with. Molten Temple, or I think Esper Mountain is a free-for-all map, I don't know, or a 4-on-4 map, I don't know. And you choose Create with Mod, so you can play with Neo School Game Heart. You can search for it as well, Neo School Game Heart, which will take a look at your macro. You will find this quite difficult if you're starting the warp-in drill, but I strongly recommend using one-on-one against an elite AI. We can create the game and I show you the elite AI. Elite, for example Zerg, does not matter which you are most familiar with or which you like the most. And economic focus is very important, because so the Zerg won't you attack as much and you can focus on your warp-in drill. But you need an opponent so you can practice the A move into the zone of death, which will be your opponent. I've taken a little bit more difficult approach using the arcade and using Daybreak NeoMT. And this is played on very hard. You can use elite, but very hard is very hard. I made additional changes to this AI. You have to scout the AI. Sometimes about 70 or 80% the AI will cannon rush you on very hard and elite. On the lower levels not so much, but you should take put this on economic focus as well and do the warp-in drill against on this map, because this map will expand a lot. The opponent will expand a lot. If you want to ignore the phoenixes which are provided to you on this map, is totally up to you. I like to scout with them until I have warp-in capability, but if that's too difficult for you, you just do not do it. I built a proxy gate because the warp-in will be faster like this, and my opponent is building a heavy army, building a 4-gate on their own, because I think I gave him the vision over the complete map. But perhaps it's just bad luck and I forget to put the AI to economic focus. I will build an Nexus early on. These kind of attacks are not done by the normal AI. I programmed it so if you are going Nexus first, you will have to multitask and probably lose a couple of probes. So we'll just take a watch at this. And now I see, okay, there's too much. I warp in. I take a look at my saturation. I warp in. I should have built a sentry, because with force fields this fight would have looked different. The opponent will attack you more than normally, and I built additional gates. I do not need pylons because I have enough, but since I want to show the complete warp-in drill, I will build pylons anyway, any moment. And I expand a lot, because he expands a lot too. Warp-in.
I'm here in the shadows.
Again, I use attack move into the zone of death, and there are the pylons. Warp-in, 2 pylons, because I'm on 2 bases. I focus down the immortal, warp in, pylons, and I think I will take a look at the saturation as well. But his army value is very higher than mine, much higher than my army value. He does not do anything about my zealot there, so I think I can attack there, but I warp in. I've shown you the pylons. I've shown you the attack move into the zone of death. And that's it for the warp-in drill. Please write down every step of the way so you can practice the warp-in drill even more perfectly than I did. I warp in, I build a pylon, and I should really take a look at my saturation, because this is a very bad saturation. Because I'm distracted by this oracle, distracted by this engagement, and this nexus is ready, and I definitely should transfer probes to this nexus. It's a very important step. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to my channel, and I see you guys next time.